My talk's called Quiet Mind, Open Heart, a way of being with people with dementia, and I slightly regret the title because it should just have been called Quiet Mind, Open Heart, a way of being. Never mind. So I'm going to speak quite personally for a little while. Just for the first couple of minutes of my talk, I'm going to talk quite personally. And then I'm going to perhaps draw on that personal experience to hopefully help you to gain a glimpse of what we think it might take to kind of transform this domain. The domain being that of the lives of folks with dementia and how that is and how we're responding to that. So I, aged about 4, spent a lot of time around a psychiatric hospital at the edge of the city, Hereford, that I grew up in, where my mum was quite a radical nurse. She was a kind of a community. Sorry. Bloody heart's too open. She was a kind of community pioneer, and so what that meant was. She didn't call herself that, she was just a nurse, but what that meant was she had a very different view of what perhaps ought to happen in the psychiatric hospital, which was very much around kind of being adventurous, so there's lots of work around the arts, lots of sense of tuning into the opportunities that were presented by the land and by nature, and so there was lots of, my mum was continually challenging the kind of hierarchical thinking and the medical model around the way the response was to folks with kind of enduring mental health issues, which were quite complex. So Mum was always kind of pushing the boundaries, and this was, 38 years ago. And then Mum went to nurse, and I've sort of thought quite a lot about these words. Her job, she used to come home and she used to say to people, they'd say, "What's your job now?" And she said, "I'm working in community." That was her job title. And what that meant was that she would drive around the villages of Herefordshire, giving very kind of attentive support to usually spouses that were kind of on, couples rather, that were kind of on the edge, if you like. So perhaps a person with dementia and their loving wife or husband. And Mum would offer them some kind of skillful support, definitely some comfort, and some really invaluable information very often about kind of how to deal with that scenario. And it was very much a kind of a community building effort that Mum would be engaged in to try and sustain a life for people in those Herefordshire villages. So she was always out, she was never at home on time, and she was working in community. And then we moved out of Hereford to a kind of quite a larger property, and my nan's dearest friend, Auntie Kath, wasn't able to live alone anymore, so she moved into our home with us. Mum was getting quite burnt out with the in-community thing, so she said, let's do adult placement. So 2 other older people moved in with us. That was adult placement at that time. And then within about 6 months, we'd registered as a care home. And there were around 18 people living with us, and Mum and Dad lived in a caravan out in the gardens, which wasn't good, really. So just a little bit about this care home. Well, it wasn't really a care home. That's the first thing to say. It was a community hub. It was characterized by a continual sense of kind of growth and energy. So very often there were people in this place that weren't paid to be there and weren't related to anybody that lived there. So they might be artists or photographers or gardeners or folks that Mum would meet and others would meet. So there was a kind of a very intentional community connecting approach where Mum was drawing on this in-community job and continually pulling people into the space and creating something good. So a good place to live and work and a good place to be. So people weren't called visitors. People would just come and be with their family. And then when people passed away, which inevitably was a feature of, Mum and Dad's support to the people that lived there, we noticed that their families didn't pass with them. They would stay connected and they would still come, and they would, I don't even want to use the word volunteer, because then we're going to start thinking about recruitment and all this. They were just people that wanted to be part of it. So my problem that I've now got having left home is I know that's possible. And it gave me a glimpse of something, and I kind of won't rest until it's recreated, really. And it's elusive. So Frameworks for Change's business is in a shift from a service paradigm to a community paradigm. What that means is a way of thinking which places right at the center of our thinking and our kind of feeling our knowledge that it will be families and communities that will restore us to better, more inclusive, dementia-related health, if you like. It won't ever be a service paradigm, in my view. It won't ever be a policy or an initiative or a program. It won't ever be an individual. It won't ever be a film or a book or somebody that runs some shiny organization. It will have to be a community paradigm. So, just coming more specifically to this notion of quiet mind, open heart. So 6 years ago, Frameworks for Change was created to seek to work with others to realize this deep change of culture and intention. Because I was unsettled. I was deeply unsettled on a personal level by this gap between what I grew up with and what I saw. So I'm not going to say too much about the bit in between, except to say that I worked as a direct care worker for about 12 years and just witnessed this yawning gap between what I'd grown up with and the way it was. It was like, why are these people sitting in the lounge while the staff are chatting to each other? I don't understand. Oh, it's because they've been done. They've been toileted or whatever. And I was like, why are you saying toileted? So, my script was just, I found all this completely shocking. And now I realize that's the pervasive culture. So that's why I kind of created Frameworks for Change. So what we do at Frameworks for Change is we wonder about what it will take to make this shift, and we realize that it's complex, and if it was easy, we'd have done it already. So part of my own practice, if you like, over the last 6 years has to become increasingly inspired by and interested in mindfulness and compassion. I'm going to say a little bit about each of those things, and my feeling that it will be quiet minds and open hearts that will ultimately be required. So what's mindfulness? Well, some people here will have heard of mindfulness. Some people will have practiced mindfulness. Some people will be more mindful than others, and some people will be more mindless than others. That's inevitable. What mindfulness is, it's defined as my ability to pay attention to the present moment without judgment. So that would be a pretty cool thing if I could offer that to people with dementia, to an individual. I'm here with you in this moment, and I'm not going to judge you. That's what mindfulness is. So it's basically, the work that we were doing together as a whole group at the beginning of the day was really about trying to really have that sense of undivided attention, that sense in which I'm here, I'm available, and now there's a chance I can really be with you. Okay, so I think that is... we speak about... I say this with huge respect for the work that's happened, but I work with people with learning disabilities for quite a while, and this person-centered language has kind of lost its resonance and its meaning for me because it's been kind of claimed by services. And actually, what do we mean by that? Well, where else could the person be but at the center? How else could we care for them but to have relationships with them? So actually, what do we mean by that? I think it's actually about, when you're with me, are you really with me? In a way that has meaning for me? Or are you elsewhere thinking about the next task? Am I part of a kind of a system and a process? Have I become objectified and dehumanized because now I'm a resident? And am I part of kind of a daily grind of loss of kind of self? So getting underneath this really important work that's happened about being person-centered and relationship-centered, what does that mean? It means, are there people who will be with me in the moment and not judge me? Okay, so that's the first piece. So we're working with people that have done, there's a report called Be Mindful, which is, it's a breakthrough report in the treatment of folks with mental health issues, particularly around anxiety and depression, because what it's shown, the evidence base is that an 8-week mindfulness program reduces the relapse for folks with depression within a year. There's a 50% more successful rate than there is for folks been on antidepressants. So this isn't, sometimes I pick up, or sometimes people even say, oh, this is a bit warm and fuzzy, isn't it? And actually mindfulness is a real discipline. You know, it's actually being willing to live with a discipline that means I will be available to you in each moment requires a personal kind of commitment, and the evidence is coming through. So we're talking to the authors of the Be Mindful report about mindful care work and what that would look, sound and feel like. So that's the piece on mindfulness, and we're seeking to understand what habits we can create that will result in more mindful care work. Tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of moment-to-moment, non-judgmental attention will have to be created for people to get better lives in care homes. Hundreds of thousands. So the open heart bit might be a bit more difficult for me to speak about, given how I started the talk. So an integration of my mind is quiet, I'm really with you, and I care deeply about your well-being. Okay, so not only allowing that, but actually, you know, saying this is what we're here to do, to show people our deep care and our compassion. Compassion, again, is a word that in the Western mind gets kind of misunderstood and is heard as pity, or is heard as something very fluffy again. Compassion, again, is a discipline. It's actually about, can I maintain a feeling of compassion with Bill, who I'm finding really difficult? And he's stressing me out, because he won't kind of respond in the way that I hope he will. Is my heart going to stay open to Bill? I'm good with compassion with Mary, because I call her really sweet and she's really easy to be with. But actually, again, it's a discipline. Can I create the conditions where I can be available to people consistently with a quiet mind and an open heart? Phew, that's kind of a big ask, isn't it? What people say, which is just lovely for us, what people say about this work is, I've noticed I'm listening to my children a little better, or, you know, I've noticed I've just kind of relaxed a little bit when they're getting a bit stressed or whatever. Because, of course, we're not just talking about dementia, we actually are talking about, or wondering about, offering ourselves and being available with this kind of discipline. So I've had the sign now, which means I've only got now about 1 minute 50 seconds to go. And what I'd like to just perhaps use that time to say, or to, in a way, I'm going to pose a question and maybe just let you know where I am in my thinking. So the question is, where are these quiet minds and open hearts right now? And for some of us, there's a gap, and there's a need to, I think, create more intention around being available and non-judgmental and warm and kind and using empathy and sensitivity, being compassionate, all of those things. I think right now there's lots of quiet minds and open hearts in the artistic community. I think right now there's lots of quiet minds and open hearts in the environmental community and in the community building realm, because there's something, and in the spiritual realm, because there's something that happens where people make a commitment to live a certain way, which might be to do with the arts, so let's call that expression. It might be to do with connecting with people, so let's call that community. It might be to do with trying to connect with people at a deeper level, so let's call that spirituality. There's a rich seam. It's abundant. Very near every care home, if you just kind of stop, take a breath and look outwards, there'll be artists that will come and will help. There'll be people that will work the land and will want to do herb gardens and all that stuff. And there'll be people that are community connectors. There are natural people within our midst who are fantastic at kind of weaving this new fabric of community. So if we can stop looking in with our lovely, shiny, seductive policies and start looking out, I think the quiet minds and open hearts are available. My final point is to leave you with this thought. It won't be expertise that will change the reality of folks with dementia. It will be all of us meeting people as if anew with a beginner's mind. So I'm with you, Mary. I've known you for 10 years. I've helped you go to the loo 1,000 times, but I'm going to try and offer you this sense of complete fresh thinking and open-heartedness. And there's a chance then I might learn something from you I don't already know. Thank you very much.